In this tutorial, we're going to make a 3D axis for a 3D slider that would be connected to your camera to shoot a left eye and a right eye. So that's how we do it in stop motion. We don't use two cameras. We use one camera and slide it a little bit to the left and to the right. If you check out our cinematography tutorials, there's a tutorial there that shows you how to set up the 3D controls in the cinematography workspace, which also shows you ways to measure how much 3D you're shooting and all of that. But before you get to all that, you have to set up an actual axis. So we're going to go over that right now. So I'm going to go here to add an axis, and I'll immediately go to the function area and change that to 3D slider. Now I happen to know I have a preset for my 3D slider, but if you don't, you'll have to calibrate it. I already have the steps per unit, and generally we work in millimeters. For 3D, we're moving a very small amount usually, because the general idea is that if you're working in miniature, as you often do in stop motion, if you think of a character shrunk down like a human and shrunk down in your set and they fit the general scale, that distance of the eyes apart on that miniature person, that would be about the amount you're going to move, which could be 2 millimeters to 5 millimeters to 8 millimeters. I mean, it tends to be pretty small. We're going to call this 3D. We already have all of our settings for this. What you'll see here is that there are two layers to it. I'm going to go ahead and color these. I'll just make one red, and then I'll make one blue. Now, if you notice here, the left eye has the zeros here, and then the right eye has got the IO, and you have a number there. You could actually just type right in here what you think your IO is, especially if it's just going to be one setting for the whole shot. So if you know this is 3 millimeters, you go in here and say 3. And now you have an IO of 3. If I isolate these, we'll see that we've got one line representing the right eye and one line representing the left eye. And we could just leave these be, and that's how it would be for most shots. But sometimes in a shot, you might need to animate the interocular as you get closer to an object or further away. You might want to open it up and get wider and wider as you get further back to create more 3D, or maybe as you get really close to an object, you don't want to hurt the audience's eyes, so you close it down. Right here, we have a button that's LR or RL, and this is based on whether your film is going to be left eye first and then right to create 3D, where you really use the left to be your main composition, and then the right eye moves over to give you your sense of 3D. Some people will do it the other way, where the right eye is the main eye and the left eye is the one that sets the 3D. The main thing this affects is which eye do you use to make your mono version of the film from. I tend to go with the left eye. That's what's set up here. Now you'll notice that there's a little icon of the camera upside down. And what that means is that if your whole rig is underslung, where you're hanging the camera upside down, you're going to want to click on this button so that it knows that what was right is now left and what was left was now right. So it has to kind of flip it around for you. Okay, we make it really easy with that button so you don't have to be flopping around with these. Okay, so here we have these axes named L and R1. If we go back to the cinematography workspace, we need to assign those positions to exposures. So I will hit the plus button here. I have an X1, X2, but I'm going to rename these. We'll call this left, and we'll call this right. And since there's these 3D selections right here for our convenience, we will assign them to the right axis. So I'm just going to hit OK here. And now we have a left and a right eye assigned to a left and R1 position. The next thing we want to do is link these. We want these to always be the same exposure. This can be easy to mess up if you're not paying attention. So if you just go ahead and link them, now as I'm finding the look of the shot, I know that if I make changes on the left, it's going to automatically change it on the right. Here's our 3D review. And here's where you can shoot 3D test shots. And once again, we want to assign these left and right, and I'll hit test shoot. It's shooting the left and the right, and now we have a 3D test shot, and we can play with the alignment and sort of get a feel with the 3D if we had some anaglyph glasses on. You'll also notice here that L is at 0 and we have R1 at 3 millimeters. If you want to, you could change this right here and say, well, I want to see what 4 millimeters looks like. And this is pretty cool because we can switch back between these as we're, deciding what we're going to actually use. And we can look up here and see that we've registered the I/O in the metadata. So that one is a 4 and this one is a 3. Okay, back to our motion control area. Now let's say we wanted to animate the I/O. Let's say the scene pulls back as it shoots and we want to increase the distance to keep the 3D nice and lively. So we take this R1 here. All right, let's say it's 6 seconds. We want to have this opened up, go to a higher number. So I'll set a key there and we can type in here, say 8 millimeters. And now we've got, okay, it's doing some crazy stuff with these. Okay, I'm gonna hold on the shift key to get that nice and flat. And depending on what the move does, we could adjust these Beziers to kind of ease into this change, or we could even slide this forward a little bit so it does the I/O shift here. And you can see as I track this, if you look here, right here at R1, as I track along, you see those numbers changing, and this is where you can animate your I/O. Another cool thing you can do with a 3D axis is add even another version of the right eye so that you could bracket your 3D. Let me show you how that's done. We'll double click into the 3D layer. We'll change our indexing to 3 positions, okay? And now for this R2, let's go ahead and type in and say, this is at 10 millimeters, and maybe we'll go in and I'm going to take out this key so that we just have one amount, or 4. So we have a 0, a 4, and a 10. That's a bit drastic. Maybe it would normally be like a 4 and a 6, but just for the heck of it, showing you that that's how you do that. Now you have to assign this to a new exposure. So again, we have to go back in to our camera settings first. We have to add a new exposure, and on this one we will call this R2, and we will go ahead and assign it R2, and we'll say OK. And so now we have 3 exposures. During the shooting, the camera will shoot left and then move over and shoot right, and then it'll shoot the second right, and then it'll go back to the left. If you wanted to test this and see what it looks like, in the stereo review, you need to reassign R1 to R2 for when you shoot a 3D test shot. Camera's moving over, 10 millimeters. Okay, so now we have much more 3D on that shot. You can see up here in the metadata it shows 10. I can use the convergence to bring that back a little bit, and that might look really cool at 10 at this distance. So that's a way to bracket your 3D, and sometimes people shoot even more than this just so that they have a lot of safety. It does take up more time shooting on the stage, of course, but that's how that's done. So keep in mind that even if you have extra positions lined up here in your 3D axis, you don't have to use them when you're shooting. If you decide, well, I don't need this R2, when you go to set up to shoot, you just unclick the little dot there for R2 and it'll only shoot left, right. So that's the basic setup for a 3D stereo axis in Dragonframe.